I warmly welcome you to this webinar dedicated to the ways to build direct democracy legislations. We at the team of Direct Democracy Navigator, we were really curious what parts of laws or what things in direct democracy laws make the resulting tool range from never used to sometimes used to used very often. And today we invite you and our speakers to together share our ideas on these topics. This webinar is organized within the Direct Democracy Navigator project. It is the project of Democracy International and Swiss Democracy Foundation. And this is a database of direct democracy legal designs that currently documents those in over 100 countries on national, regional, and local levels. And if you want to learn more about that, you always can go to the link that will appear in a couple of minutes in the chat. And yeah, without any further ado, please welcome our first speaker, Professor Yen-Tu Su, the research professor at Academia Sinica Institute of Law. And yeah, his research fields include the law of democracy, constitutional laws, and he will tell us about direct democracy in Taiwan and how tools changed depending on the legislations. Yen-Tu, you're welcome.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. I'm Yen-Tu Su from Academia Sinica, Taiwan. And it's great to be here with you discussing the institutional design of direct democracy and especially the referendum process. So I guess I can divide my presentation into three parts. I want to talk about three things. First, let me talk a little bit more, again, probably about why institutional design matters, and matters a lot in having direct democracy. And the second part, I would like to draw some general lessons from Taiwan's experience, 2 decades experience with direct democracy. And then I can go through a few design issues regarding how to structure the referendum process. Okay, that's basically my plan. So first, let's talk about why we need to think seriously about the institutional design of the referendum process. Why institutional design matters, or why the rules matters. The answer is just quite simple, because there are more than one way to do direct democracy. Just like there are more than one way to do electoral democracy. You can elect your political representatives through a majoritarian electoral rules or through proportional representation. So similarly, you can choose to have a system allowing citizens to initiate directly some kind of legislation, or you can have what we call indirect initiatives. That the citizen proposals will be sent first to the legislator and to consider, and if the legislator chooses not to legislate, then there will be a popular vote. So there are just many kinds of referendum direct democratic process for us to choose, and our choices are not just limited to this kind of big institutional types, are not just limited to this kind of big questions. The question of institutional design go all the way down to the very detail of how the process works in reality. So there are not lots of nuts and bolts issues in our institutional design, and they really matters. They can make quite a difference. They will determine not just how frequent the process will be used by the ordinary citizens, but also about they will also make difference on how good the decisions are were made by the citizens. Good or bad decisions were made. So before blaming the bad results of referendum vote to just the people, or because people are unthinking, or they are dumb or stupid, we have to think about if the designer of the process or did the right work or not. So that's my take on the first question of why institutional design matters. So Taiwan, let me move to the second part. Maybe we can draw some general lessons from Taiwan's experience. So Taiwan we have our first referendum act in 2003. And during that regime, we had 6 nationwide national referendums, but all of them were either proposed by the president or by 2 major parties. And the referendum act set pretty high mechanical barriers to ordinary citizens to use this process to make policy decisions. So it was often described as a birdcage, a metaphorical birdcage, aimed at restraining the power of the people, or restraining the power of the people in determining public policy. So we have a major reform. We had a major reform in 2018, lowering all the mechanical barriers set up in the previous regime. So previously, it takes roughly about 100,000 people to be able to propose a ballot questions. And under the new regime, it only takes less than 2,000 people. And during the circulation stage, previously it required almost 1 million people signature for the initiative or referendum proposal to get on the ballot. And under the new regime, only requires less than 300,000 people. So the new law significantly reduced the barriers for set up by the signature requirements, and make and actually make Taiwan one of the most citizen-friendly system of direct democracy, having that kind of system. So we do have that kind, but after 2018, after we experienced the 10 referendum votes in one day, and that caused many problems, and we revised the Referendums Act again in 2019, and this time we decouple the referendum from nationwide elections, so that we will have a separate referendum day for the voting of referendum issues. That is separate from the nationwide elections. So in 2021, we have again 4 more referendum vote held on that year. So I mean, we are still in the process of experimenting the design of the referendum process. We learned some hard lessons through the trial and error, and I guess maybe Taiwan can offer some general lessons. I want to draw 3 lessons essentially. First, I think it's very important to keep in mind that the referendum does not occur in a political vacuum. And we are actually not just designing the referendum process. We are actually designing a hybrid democracy. We need to take into consideration electoral politics, party politics, in designing our system, our referendum law. That's because we are bound to find that many political actors, elites, representatives, elites, political parties, they actually do play a very important role in structuring and conducting the referendum politics. And so we need to think, we need to rethink the direct democracy, not as something that is completely different from representative democracy. There's actually a very important element of political representation in the referendum process that we need to consider. It's just not that we can simply bypass some political intermediaries and let the people speak for themselves. They will always have some kind of political representation in this process, and we need to think again how to structure that representation. And so that follows a second lesson is the importance or the need to have some checks and balances on the agenda power wielded by the referendum proposers. Proposers will actually have a very strong, significant agenda setting powers, and that power need to be checked because most of the time they are either opposition parties or some self-appointed entrepreneurs, political entrepreneurs, and their agenda setting power have to be checked to make sure that the policy process is good for the community, for the constitutional community as a whole. So if their power left unchecked, the referendum process could just become what we call a tragedy of commons, because they were just to think about their political interest and not about the common good in general. So there are many ways to make sure that we build in enough checks and balances in making sure that the agenda of the referendum process is actually well controlled by the society as a whole. And the final lesson I took from our experience is that time is really, really crucial. You need time to make a deliberate decision. You need time to deliberate. You need time to acquire information. You need time to circulate. You need time to refine the referendum proposals. And to make a good referendum decision, it really takes a lot of time. And if you are rushed to make a decision, and there's a high probability that you will end up having a bad decision. And so the temporal dimension of the referendum regulation is quite important. And with that, let me go through a few more detailed design issues that maybe Taiwan can offer our experiences. First, as I already mentioned, is the signature requirements. Taiwan, we have a two-stage signature gathering process in Taiwan. At the first stage, it's the proposing stage. It already require a certain number of citizens to be the proposer of the referendum. And that kind of requirement matters a lot because under the old regime, only the major parties or only the major parties have the political resources to mobilize this kind of voters. So if the signature requirement set a too high a bar, it would just simply keep many political outsiders and civic groups out of this process. So signature requirements certainly matters. That's why, and at the second stage, previously for example, we required 5% of the electorate to sign on the proposal for the proposal to get on the ballot. And after the reform, it only takes 1.5% electorate, which is a far more reasonable number. Still, far more manageable for ordinary civic groups. And the Taiwan currently is also considering implementing a system enabling electronic signature gathering, which would certainly make it easier for referendum proposals to gather the required signatures. So that's another way to improve the system. The second issue is about the voting threshold, whether we need to put some either turnout threshold or approval threshold on the referendum vote. And so previously we do have a turnout threshold setting at the 50% of the electorate, and that kind of rules actually had the effect of damping the turnout because you can simply abstain, and that abstention would be counted as a no vote, and so after the 2018 reform, we just changed the turnout threshold into an approval threshold. So under the new law, it not only requires that the yes vote exceed the no vote, and the yes vote has at least the 25% of the electorate behind it for the ballot proposals to be approved. So that kind of threshold is also a classic design issue to be considered. And the third one is referendum timing. I already mentioned that previously it's possible for us to have referendum votes be held at the same date of nationwide elections, and that way, and actually we still do hold concurrent referendum elections with nationwide elections in specifically for constitutional referendum in Taiwan, because constitutional referendum has even higher approval threshold set in our constitution. So turnout is a big concern. But after we decouple the referendum from the nationwide election process, certainly that would have some certain effect on voter turnout, but also that would make it less appealing. That would also make the referendum process less appealing, a political tool for political parties. Otherwise, political parties would have a strong, especially opposition party, would have strong incentive to use referendum strategically to help them set the political agenda, set a framing the issue of the day, to boost, to help them, to actually help them in their electoral competition. So that timing or referendum time, how we set up the referendum day is also one issue to be considered. And the fourth, and I also want to talk about the importance of pre-circulation or pre-election review of the referendum propositions. I think it's a very important tool or mechanism to check the agenda power of the proposers. You certainly want to have a review process that make sure that the proposals are constitutional and adhere to the subject matter restrictions as set up in your referendum law. And how that process can work really affect the quality of the referendum decision. So here in Taiwan, after a few years of litigation, we came to the conclusion that yes, the Central Election Commission and the Administrative Court have the authority to review the constitutionality as well as the legality of the referendum proposal initiated by the citizens. And we also, but we are still on the way to to expand the standing doctrine so that the opponents of the referendum proposals could also challenge the legality of the referendum proposals in courts. And I think that's the right way to do things, but we are still on that. We still need to work on that. And then there are issues concerning campaign finance, how to make sure we have a level the playing field for parties to take part, engage in the discussion, deliberation leading up to the vote. So campaign finance is also need to be considered. The last but not the least is about how we vote. It's the design of the voting system. You know, to my knowledge, the Switzerland do their citizen initiatives mainly by mail voting. So they get to so each voters get to consider take some time in their home and to go through the ballot propositions. But in Taiwan, we only have in-person same-day voting, and that certainly would affect the decision capacity of the process. So even as we speak, the Central Election Commission in Taiwan is actually considering proposing some amendment, setting the maximum number of the ballot proposition to be voted on the same day. The reason why they think it's necessary to have that kind of control or that kind of regulation is that if you have just way too many ballot propositions to vote on the same day, it might run the risk of overwhelming the voting process. They were bound to have long lines in front of the voting stations, and they will also might have the risk of resulting in bad decisions made by citizens, because citizens probably would just be overwhelmed for having to decide on so many issues, and they just don't have time to think it through. I think I've been told a lot on these details, and I welcome and I look forward to our further discussions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for such an insightful and really, really detailed presentation. And we for sure will come back to all those topics, especially with the questions from our participants. And just a quick reminder, you're very, very welcome to write your questions as they appear in our chat and during the Q&A session. After Kim's presentation, we will be able to read them and discuss them, ask our speakers to reply to your questions. So yes, please feel free to write them in the chat. And with that, I'm very welcome to introduce our second speaker, Kim Graves, a PhD candidate at the Catholic University of Lille. And she's researching the emergence of direct democracy institutions globally by working with our Direct Democracy Navigator project. And yes, Kim, the floor is yours. You're really welcome. And thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I don't want to speak for too long because Yensu's explanations have already covered a lot of what I wanted to talk about. So currently I'm looking at the institutional designs sorry, for the effects of the institutional designs on their use. And I have so far, so I've been looking at a lot of different countries and talking to a lot of different experts, including Yen-Su, who was really great at explaining Taiwan to me as well. And I just have a few things that I think are also relevant when it comes to the design issue. I think one thing that hasn't really been touched upon yet has been the issue if the results of the referendum are going to be binding or not. This obviously has an impact on how people pursue the importance of the proposal and if it's necessary to attend, which can also then have an influence if there is a participation quorum. These quorums have already been shown that they generally have more negative effects on participation because they can lead to a strategy of boycott when it comes to the actual vote. But yeah, what is it, and especially it's also important to say what exactly is voted upon, because sometimes in some countries initiatives have to present an already fully formulated law proposal. In others, for example, they only have to make a rough suggestion of a law that could be implemented. Or it could be more of a general question of do we want X or don't we want X? This has been quite interesting to look at because in a lot of laws, it's not specified what exactly has to be, what has to be proposed, how the proposal has to look like. And this leads in many countries to situations in which it's unclear what exactly, how this process can even start. So it's important to have a well formulated and in great detail formulated proposal, not law, sorry, implementation law on referendums. What exactly, which is the authority that checks the proposals? Are there the preconditions? In a lot of countries, it is possible to have citizens' initiatives of issues of national importance, but often it takes years and lawsuits to define what exactly is national importance, what issues are included and which are not. And if it's not defined, it can very well lead to a very arbitrary decision on what is important or not by some bureaucrats. Yes. Also, I wanted to talk about the restrictions on what can be voted upon and what not, because you can have laws which say you can vote on these 1, 2, 3, 5 topics, political issues, or you can say you can vote on everything but taxation, international agreements, or something like that. So far, I haven't really found an effect on these differences, but I'm also not finished yet. But it's interesting to think about, and I would love to hear what you thought, if it's if an inclusive or an exclusive restriction on issues, which would have what effect. Yeah, and maybe just to include, it's also, as Yen-Su said, it's not a political vacuum and not every country is the same. When it comes to thresholds, we also have to include citizens or have in mind citizens that live outside of the national territory. If countries like Armenia, for example, have a very large diaspora in different countries, then signature collection can be very, very difficult because they have to be in 3 or 4 different countries all at once. yeah, and an interesting case for me so far has been North Macedonia, because they have in the constitution and in their referendum law, it is quite extensive, the rights to a citizens' initiative, but it is never really used. I mean, the lack of details for this, I mean, not lack of details, but so far it hasn't really been used, so there haven't been a lot of examples to follow. But everything is there, so to say, to start making citizens' proposals, but they're not doing it. And this is the question outside of the legal designs. I know it's a little bit out of scope, but it's also interesting to think about. What issues do, what effects do political culture have on the use, or yeah, how much trust does it have to be? Do citizens need to place in the institutions in order for them to believe that this is a valid strategy to pursue, to put in the resources, because the citizens' initiative is very, very resource heavy, needs a lot of resources. So if it's not even perceived as this is going to have an effect, then they won't start doing it. Yes, I think that's about it, what I wanted to add, and I'm really happy to hear what you have to say. Some hypotheses I can check out in my work. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. And as we are waiting for some, yes, we actually have the first question, and that one is from Sarah, and the question is, what were the key factors or motivation behind the amendments to make citizen initiatives more accessible in Taiwan? And Yanto, I think this is directed to you. So if you can answer that, please. And meanwhile, yeah, please write your questions in the chat and we will read them out loud.
Yes, that's an excellent question. To answer that, I would have to give you a few some background information about Taiwan politics. So our first referendum act was, as I said, enacted in 2003. But at that time, the parliamentary majority was controlled by the Kuomintang, the party that used to rule Taiwan during the authoritarian regime. And Kuomintang simply doesn't like direct democracy, even though the right to initiative and referendum was actually enshrined in the original Republic of China Constitution. So at that time, the main political opposition was the Democratic Progressive Party, now the current ruling party in Taiwan. And they have a strong faith in the people, and they really advocate the use of direct democracy back for a long time. And one of the motivation is to use this process to ensure the self-determination of Taiwan, and to ensure that the Taiwan's the popular sovereignty of Taiwan can have some kind of institutional expression. So that's actually the policy platform of the DPP for quite a long time. And they try to push for. They were actually the main force behind the legislation of the referendum process, and so you can think of the first referendum act as a way of the Kuomintang, the then ruling party, to counteract, to respond to this kind of demand. So now they can claim that, yes, now we have a referendum process, but it's just that it's very, very difficult for citizens to use. So what happened is that in 2016, the DPP won not just the presidency, but for the first time, the legislative majority in our unicameral parliament called Legislative Yuan. So now they have the power. They have the power to amend, to revise the old Referendum Act. So in a sense, they fulfilled their campaign, their long-time political promises or campaign pledges, but it's just that they didn't think too much into the design issues of the referendum process. So they found that there are so many trade-offs and issues to be considered. So they changed the signature requirement at the upstream of the process, but they didn't change the voting arrangement at the downstream of the process. So we have a very chaotic referendum war in 2018. We can actually put it that way. And so they actually learned a hard lesson. And that's why they think this time we need to separate. So there's actually a change of heart on the part of the DPP. Previously, I mean the DPP were all for the holding of the referendum along with nationwide elections. They think that's the way to ensure that we have decent voter turnout, to ensure that the referendum outcome is representatives of what the people people really want. But now then they figure that the referendum process can actually be weaponized by opposition parties. And they thought that by they change of they have a 180-degree change of policy. So now they think it would work better to have a separate day just for the referendum vote. So after the 2019, we actually have a very different political cycle for referendum and for representative elections. So we will have nationwide election in every even year, and we will have a referendum vote in every odd year since 2022. So that's basically the story behind the change, the referendum reform in Taiwan.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. And we have another question from Wolfgang. This is the following. Should we not distinguish between the level of governance, local very direct, provincial, national representative, regional EU or global UN, least direct but increasingly omnilateral, as for the introduction of the referenda? And maybe both of you can voice some ideas, but Kim, if you can start.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's very important to distinguish which level we're talking about, because in a lot of different, in federal countries, but also unitary countries, there are different issues that are handled by different levels. International treaties should probably not be, need to be decided upon, or constitutional changes on national level. But if it comes to a change of district lines or something like that, there is definitely no need to ask the entire country about this, but only the regional. So I think it's important to differentiate, especially when we look at the topics that are decided upon.
Yen-Tu, if you have anything to add, you're very welcome.
Right. In addition to differentiating the levels of referendum, there's also an important distinction between constitutional referendum and ordinary referendum. And in fact, many countries required constitutional referendum for the ratification of their constitutional amendments. But probably they don't have a similar process for citizens to decide ordinary policy issues. So these are all choices to be considered by the institution, by the constitutional designers. In fact, I'd say. So in Taiwan, we in addition to the national referendums I told earlier, we also have local referendums and constitutional referendums, and whether people want to. Some people would hope that maybe we can start with some practice at the local level, so that the people get used to this kind of practice, and through that kind of exercise, they will develop their agency, their trust in the system, and so that they can go a step further next time. The problem is that nowadays, even though there's an old saying that all politics are local, but not in our modern times. Sometimes people actually pay more attention to national politics than local politics. So from Taiwan, we even though we have a few local referendums, the problem is that people are just not that interested in the issues to be voted on. So I'm not sure that that kind of experience would help them to whether that kind of experience is needed for a country to develop a nationwide or a more national kind of referendum process.
Thank you. Another question that we have is from Melike, and it's the following. What are the good practices that political parties can follow for the referenda? What are their role in the individual decision-making about referendum for citizens? And again, I think you can both answer if you would like to, but Kim, again, if you can start, please.
Thank you for the question. I have to say I've not looked very closely at the actual processes because I wasn't, so far I've looked into the design issues, but political parties are definitely really important in the whole process. In some countries, it is possible for political parties as such to start citizens' initiatives, and others they are not allowed, but need to they're not allowed to start an initiative as a party, for example, even if they're not like represented in national level or whatever level. They are always, political parties are always, they give cues to the citizens on how they should vote on on a matter or another. That is that has been identified as a very important factor on how people make political decisions, if they should agree with one issue or another. They usually look at the party that they feel closest to and see what their stance on the matter is. I don't really know about it. I mean, yeah, I hope that's kind of what you were asking.
Thank you. Yintu, would you like to add anything?
Also a very excellent questions. And Taiwan actually learned some hard lessons in this regard. So back in 2018, when there are so many referendum votes for voters to decide, the DPP, the ruling party then, they said, oh, maybe we should just stay on the sideline and we will just respect what the people decide, what the people want. And after the vote, after the election, they knew they made a big mistake. And so the next time around in 2022, the political parties, both the ruling party and the opposition party take a very active role in the referendum process, because the many referendum proposals were actually proposed by the opposition party. As I mentioned before, that process, direct democratic process, can actually be weaponized and used as a means of party competition. And so this time, the ruling party run a very rigorous campaign against this kind of the referendum, and so I'd say that the interaction between referendum politics and the party politics is a very important questions, very important issue to watch. And political parties and the established electoral elites, electoral representatives, and political parties, they do have some responsibility to help citizens make good decisions. They need to provide information, provide the cues, just like Kim mentioned, because otherwise it can be just manipulated by other forces, even though they claim they claim that they are the true representative of the people. So to avoid the populist politics in the referendum politics, we do need to have a healthy party competition in this process.
Thank you very much. And maybe before we wrap up the Q&A session, we can answer one last question. I know there are more questions in the chat, and we will make sure to, after the webinar, find a way to provide you with the answers to those. But for the matter of time, and like we are really sticking to what we promised you in the webinar promotion or schedule, one last question. It could be said that direct democracy in Switzerland grew out of the popular assemblies historically held at the village and canton levels. Are there similar historical precedents in the histories of other nations? Asks Kate. And Yen-Tu, do you want to answer that question?
We also learned the process from Switzerland and the United States. So that's why in 1947, when we wrote our first original ROC Constitution, the Constitution included the right to initiative and referendum. And the framers of the Constitution actually looked to what happened in the United States and Switzerland. So even what I mean is that it's not a historical tradition of Taiwan society to have this kind of decision-making process. But since we are in the globalized world, we get to see what others are doing. And if we think that's a good idea, we would just like to emulate and to have our own kind of process.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe add similarly, the process kind of similar to what Yen-Tu's described also happened in Uruguay, which when they decided to be the Switzerland of South America, so the constitution writers and lawmakers looked at Switzerland and copy-pasted a lot of the direct democratic institutions into Uruguay. I mean, I don't have very close knowledge of their history. Maybe I can also point to post-Soviet countries, which all got new institutions after the end of the Cold War. And a lot of them, I'm not sure, maybe even all of them also included the right to referendums in their constitutions. Very vague, mostly. And in some countries, they have implementing laws that would explain how to do this. In others, it's just an article in the Constitution that has very little effect. But this could be explained by the lack of self-determination in these countries during the Cold War and even before the sphere, like within the sphere of influence. But I can't say definitively.
Yes, thank you very much. And I see still the questions are popping up. And yes, as I promised, we definitely will find a way to come back to you with the answers from our speakers to those questions. But now, for the moment, I would propose we proceed to our, as I promised, sort of hands-on activity. And for that purpose, first of all, in a couple of minutes, you will be allowed to unmute yourself and turn on your video. You will be placed in randomly in 3 different rooms. And after you will be placed in those rooms, you will only need to click on the button that says join the room. Each room will have in their chat a message with the legal design of one of the countries. It is Uruguay, Romania, or Ukraine. And you will be able to take a look at the legal designs of those countries and together with the group discuss what do you think is good about this tool, what is bad, what can be changed, and so on. I would like to ask you in each group, pick one person who then to the whole group maybe can present 3, 5, 2 statements, whatever you want to. Like what were your ideas on the topic that you discussed? And you will be having around 15 or so minutes for this activity. And after that time, you will be returned to the main room and we can do this final round of exchanging our thoughts on these countries. Start and yeah, should we start with Romania?
Yeah. So our group, we talked about Romania. In Romania, it takes 100,000 signatories with a geographical restriction that it needs to be 5,000 signatures in each county. Yeah, in each county. So we thought that this was quite high, a quite high signature collection, and it can be quite difficult to get 5,000 signature collections, no matter how big or how small each county is. So this is already, we thought this was quite a barrier. We thought the time for signature collection is 6 months. We thought that was quite adequate. And we briefly talked about the fact that in Romania, the initiative is only a gender initiative, so that in the end, the people don't get to vote on another law that was proposed through the signature collection process, but it's then mandated if you get the collection, the mandatory signatures, that it will have to be discussed in Parliament. From looking at the case in specific, I did see that a lot of the proposals that are made are stuck in some parliamentary committee, which gets delegated to and then is kind of carried on as heavy as dead weight in the committee agendas. So yeah, we didn't think it was a very good design, I guess.
Okay, thank you. I think we can go on with Ukraine.
Yeah, okay. I was asked to do a very quick presentation. From what I remember, please, Anna, correct me if I'm wrong. There are a lot of hoops to jump in order to get a referendum at all. Starting with 60 people that have to be voted by at least 300 people. And then in the end, there is a requirement of signature of 3 million votes, 3 million signatures, sorry. And then in the end, even all of this has to be done within 90 days. And afterwards, if everything is done and said, the result of the referendum is not binding. It just needs to be discussed in Parliament. So, and so far it has never been done because it is so hard to actually get a referendum going in Ukraine. And what we discussed was that, of course, this is not efficient and it doesn't really help people engaged with the participatory process in any way. And we discussed saying that it should at least be binding if it has all of these requirements to happen. And the requirements should be lowered significantly because it is a very, very high threshold to achieve in a very small period of time. We also suggested that the time constraints should be a lot laxer to get people going. And that was more or less what we discussed.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Uruguay. Do you have
So on Uruguay, we said that the 10% signature threshold or limit is okay due to the small population size. So that's like 350. It's okay. And we also said that getting 50% of the 35 yes votes, which will be like 17.5, is not representative enough. Because for us to make the process legitimate, we have to, the results should reflect the will of the people. So just getting like 50% of the yes vote, which is like 35% of those who vote, and then we get 50% of that, it's not really representative of the will of the people, since the whole process is also binding. So we have to like make sure that there's a balance when we are setting these percentages to ensure that it reflects the will of the people. The majority rule is, yeah. That is what we talked about. I don't know if any of my group members would also want to add more. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Kim, do you want to add something?
I think you make a really good point about the 35% and 50% of the yes votes. On the other hand, it does say that it's 35% of the population. No, sorry, forget it. I just thought about my point that I wanted to make and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because it's 35% of the population, not of the total electorate. So it already like changes the relativity between, because there's only the total electorate is the total population does not equal the total electorate, everybody who has the right to vote. And if we have 35% of the population, this could include 50% of the, I mean, I don't know the numbers. I haven't run them. I don't know how big the electorate is, but this could represent half of the electorate that would be allowed to vote in this anyway. And then it would be 50% of the electorate. So this is something that I've been looking into, because it really depends on the relative measure. Yeah, Olga.
In the information given to us, it said 35% of the votes, not of the population. If I remember, 35% of the votes votes that are
Yes, votes.
not of the whole population, but of the electorate. 35% of the electorate, and then they accept 50%. They need 50% of the 35% of the electorate in order to be accepted, the vote to pass, not the whole population. That's what it said.
Okay,
Yeah, that's right. That's how I remember it as well. Yes.
good. Okay, then I misunderstood, but my point still stands.
Okay, and I think with that, we can already wrap up. And really, thank you very much for such an active participation